Shalom. I am going to talk with you now about the wa consecutive. I'm going to do this in two video sections so that I don't run over my time limit with YouTube. The wa consecutive at one time, or the wow consecutive, at one time was called the wow conversive because when the wow is added to the cal perfect, it can cause that verb to take on an imperfect translation. Let's just start with talking about a few things. The set of charts that we're about to look at and the set of charts that's provided in your textbook, your Prodico Van Pelt textbook. We're going to look at the wow consecutive and consecutive verbal forms in narrative sequences because that's where the wow consecutive is going to be found, in a narrative sequence. And a narrative sequence is just a sentence that says something like, and Dr. Williams taught Hebrew and she designed the tests and she organized and structured the lesson plans. So it's a sequence of she did this and then she did that and then she did this. And so that's what I mean by a narrative sequence, or a sentence of narrative sequence. Consecutive verbal forms are used primarily to denote sequences of consecutive actions, this and this and this, either in the past, the present, or the future. Remember last semester when we talked about the cal imperfect and the cal perfect forms of the verb, we said that this is the traditional or the typical way that it's translated, but it can also, in certain situations, be translated in past, present, or future. Well, this is when we add the wow consecutive. This is one of the things that changes that. That's why it was once called the wow conversive, because it converted the perfect to the imperfect tense. Now, here, if we can focus in on this, here we have the basic forms with the cal imperfect. Now, let's see if I can get this right. It's always backwards with the camera. Here's the cal imperfect without the wa consecutive. We have yishmor and itzkor. Yishmor, he will observe, and yitzkor, he will remember. And you should be familiar with these because of all the studying and memorization that you've done on the cal imperfect paradigms. This is just your typical cal imperfect verbal construct. But when we add the wow to this, the wow consecutive, this is what it looks like. It becomes wa yishmor and wa yikor. And he observed and he remembered. Now you would think that when you add the cal to the imperfect, it would be translated and he will observe and he will remember. But when you have the wow consecutive, it takes this in this imperfect state and puts it into completed action, the perfect, and he observed and he remembered. Now, here is your basic imperfect with a wow consecutive. Now, this is very similar to the definite article. Remember, when you put the definite article, when you prefix a verb with a definite article, it's a he, pathic, dogish forte. And here, it's almost the same identical construct, prefix construct that you see with a definite article, all except it's wow, pathic, dogish forte that's attached to the beginning of your verb. So that's going to maybe kind of help you because you've already memorized most of that paradigm. So it transfers into the future tense, but with the wa consecutive, it remains in that past tense state. So when you translate it and there's the wa consecutive. I'm from old school. We used to call this, when I took Hebrew in seminary, we called it the wa conversive, but the verbiage has changed and now it's the wa or the wow consecutive. So if you hear me say wow conversive, you know that I mean the wow consecutive. So here's the cal perfect paradigm that we should all be familiar with by now. And what I'd like for us to do is just to go through this because we've seen this so many times, and to actually pronounce it. Yiktol, let's say yiktol, tiktol, tiktol, Tiktaalo. Oh, I'm sorry, Tiktaalo. Um, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong side. No, I was on the right side. There we go. Let me start over again just so I know I have this right for you guys. Yiktol, Tiktol, Tiktol, Tiktali, Ektol, Yiktalu, Tiktolna, Tiktalay, Tiktalu, Tiktolna, and Niktal. Just so you can see that. And it's good to go back and always practice pronouncing that. Now, when you add the wa consecutive to that, it's going to be pronounced Wayiktol, Watiktol, Wytiktol, Wytiktali, Wyektol, Wyiktalu, Wyektolna, Wyetiktalu, Wytiktolna, and Wyniktol. And it's good just to go over those and practice them. Now remember, without the wa consecutive, it's Yiktol, Tiktol, Tiktol, Tiktali, Ektol, Yiktalu, Tiktolna, Tiktalu, Tiktolna, Niktol. And then when you add the wa, it's just when you add the wa conversive, the wow consecutive, it's Wyiktol, Wytiktol, Wytiktol, Wytiktali, Wyektol, Yiktalu, Wytiktolna, Wytiktalu, Wytiktolna, Wyniktol. Now, in the first common singular, see if I can get this up here for you to see it. In the first common singular, there is no dogish forte, and instead of having a wow patha, you now have a wow comments. Now, the reason for this is that the guttural aleph cannot take the dogish forte, and so the patha experiences that compensatory lengthening, and it becomes, instead of a patha, it becomes a comments. And that's what happens there in the first common singular, just so you'll know. Now, actually, we're doing pretty well with these. Now, this is just, and I think most of these paradigms are also in your textbook, but these are also the wa consecutive, the cal imperfect paradigm with a regular wow. Because how do you know when it's a wow consecutive and should be translated in the future tense, and he will observe, and when you should translate it, and he observed. So this is what this paradigm is going to answer. It's going to answer that question. As you see here, with the wow, there we go. With the wow, the cal imperfect with the wow consecutive, you have, look at that paradigm. It stays consistent in all of them except for the first common singular. It's a wow pathic dogish forte in every one of those. And then when you come to the first common singular, because the aleph is a guttural, it cannot take the dogish forte. Therefore, the pathic experiences compensatory lengthening, and it becomes a wow comments on that first common singular, and it stays consistent in the paradigm. So when it's going to be just a cal imperfect with a regular wow, and should be translated and he will kill, and so forth, look at that. It's a wow with a vocal schwa, and that stays consistent throughout. You're not going to ever find, to my knowledge, a wow consecutive that will appear with a vocal schwa. And so if you see a wow with a vocal schwa, then you know that that is a regular wow and should be translated and he or she or it or they, so on and so forth, will do whatever the verb translates as. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, introduces you to these wow consecutives. They're not hard. You're not having to memorize any new paradigms because you already know your cal perfect and your cal imperfect. I would recommend, since we are kind of starting out with a bang because we're having to pick up chapter 17, but I do encourage you, as you have a few moments, go back and review the cal imperfect and the cal perfect. We will never get away from these. Remember, 70% of all Hebrew verbs appear in the cal form. So as we learn other verbs, don't ever forget your cal paradigms, and it's not nearly as important that you memorize the other paradigms for the hifil, the hofal, the nefil, and hithpael, and so on. Those stems are not nearly as crucial for you to memorize as the cal. Memorize your cal stems and know them well. And there's no easy way to do it. It's just memorize, memorize, memorize. And even though you can carry your parsing chart in with you from your Hebrew Helps when you take your quizzes, if you do not know your cow paradigms, they're not going to help you very much. Those tools are made for the exceptions and not for you to blow off not knowing the cow perfect, the basic cow perfect, and basic cow imperfect paradigms. So again, go back over those, memorize those, and get them down. I'll see you in a few more minutes.